Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar of the Immune Deficiency Foundation, or IDF. My name is Brian Fitzik, Associate Vice President of Community Services at IDF, and I'll be your moderator today. Our topic is severe combined immunodeficiency, or SCID, which is a primary immunodeficiency that results in the failure to develop critical components of the immune system. As a result, the condition can be fatal in infancy unless identified early and treated. As one can imagine, learning that a loved one has SCID can be overwhelming. You're no doubt filled with questions. What does this diagnosis mean? What happens next? How do I handle this news? Where can I go to get my questions answered? Take a deep breath. You are not alone. IDF has a deep understanding of the challenges and emotions you are facing, and the information in this webinar is designed to help you cope and begin making informed decisions along your journey. This webinar would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsor, Leadiant Biosciences, which researches, develops, and distributes novel therapies for several diseases, including SCID. Many thanks to Leadiant Biosciences for your legacy of serving people affected by rare diseases. Although rare, SCID is the most serious primary immunodeficiency disorder. Children with SCID lack immune protection against bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and are prone to repeated and persistent infections that would not normally cause illness in a person with a normal immune system. In someone with SCID, these infections can be extremely serious or even life-threatening. Many of us may recall the story of David Vetter, affectionately known as the boy in the bubble. David was born with SCID in 1971. At that time, a bone marrow transplant from an exact match donor was the only treatment for SCID, but there was no match available. So David spent his entire life, 12 years, in a protected environment to maintain a germ-free surrounding. Sadly, David ultimately died after a failed bone marrow transplant in early adolescence. Fortunately, since then, there has been much progress in the identification and treatment of SCID. Early detection of SCID is key to treatment, making possible life-saving interventions before infections occur. In May 2010, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services added SCID to the recommended uniform screening. Because in large part of IDF's SCID newborn screening campaign, most states, and soon to be all, have added SCID to their newborn screening panel. This webinar's approach is a little different from the others we've produced. Today we're going to explore this topic from the family side. The loved ones of a person with SCID may not have a medical license or healthcare background, but their experience is an essential voice when learning to cope with a SCID diagnosis. The insights and wisdom that can be imparted from their perspective is unique and can help to navigate other families along the journey to wholeness. Today, to answer our questions of what to expect and how one family dealt with a SCID diagnosis is Nicole Locastro. Because of newborn screening, Nicole learned that her son, Walker, had SCID. As mentioned earlier, babies born with SCID lack the capacity to produce functional forms of the immune system's big guns, the B and T cells. When speaking with Nicole initially, I was struck with her authentic passion she brings to this topic of the family experience and her willingness to share her message with everyone in the SCID community that there is joy, there's purpose, and there is hope in their journey. Her reflection she shares today is grounded in her family's personal journey from diagnosis to recovery. And during this webinar, Nicole will offer some thoughtful insights into the family experience and some strategies her family's employed along the way. Now, without further ado, we welcome Nicole. Hello, Nicole, and thank you for being here with us today.
Hey, Brian. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this SCID webinar. I'm so happy, and hopefully everyone will be able to benefit from this in the SCID community. And I'm hoping to really reach out and get some people that need our support.
Great. So let's start at the beginning. December 2013, and you and your husband, TJ, have just given birth to your firstborn son, Walker. Does he appear healthy? And then what led up to the SCID diagnosis?
Yes, he appeared to look perfectly healthy, beautiful baby boy, and we were over the moon that this finally happened for us. And what led up to the SCID diagnosis was a week after we arrived home, we had a call from our pediatrician, and she told us there was a test that came back from the newborn screening. We don't know exactly what it is, but we know that it's his immune system. And she said, until we find out what this is, you need to go in lockdown, so nobody in and out of your house, don't come in contact with anybody, and just try to stay as clean and germ-free as possible while we lived within our home. So after a couple weeks of her sending us to an immunologist specialist here in San Antonio, he finally, about on the third week, told us that Walker, his diagnosis is SCID, which we had no idea what he was talking about. It was like a foreign language to us. We didn't understand any of it. So, we kept thinking, I kept thinking, what did I do? What was wrong? Did I do something wrong in my pregnancy? And after he got through a little bit of explanation, we realized that it was all in the genes, and there was nothing that you could do about it. So, yeah, that's how we learned what was going on with him.
Mm. No one is ever prepared to hear that his or her child has a life-threatening illness. Many parents feel overwhelmed and confused in those first few days and weeks after receiving such news. Nicole, can you walk us through some of those first few days following Walker's birth and the emotions that ran through your head upon learning the diagnosis?
Sure. When we first heard about the diagnosis, again, like I said, it was kind of like he was talking a foreign language with all the medical jargon, and it was like he was talking to us like the Charlie Brown teacher. I had no idea what he was saying to me. So really the first few days was just kind of a numb feeling, because since I didn't understand what was going on, half of what he was telling me what we had to do, I didn't understand that either. So it was just kind of, numb, and you kind of get that tunnel vision, like a lost tunnel vision. But I think a couple days after that, he said we had to check into the hospital and prepare for a bone marrow transplant. So we had 2 days to kind of get home, get everything together. So I think just as, my mom instincts kicked in, and I just started running on autopilot and kind of just did whatever the doctor said, which was go home, get packed up, be prepared to stay in the hospital for a little while, and, let everybody know that they're not going to be seeing me for a little while. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of what I did. I just went home and tried to get together everything that I could that I thought I might need, and it just it went pretty fast, honestly. It went very fast that weekend of getting ready to get into the hospital. Yeah.
So you have the initial shock, and that might be over, but the journey continues. What was it like with your family, during the first months of Walker's birth? Being a new parent is already overwhelming, but with the diagnosis on top of everything, your family schedules and routines, they must have been turned upside down.
Oh, yeah. Everything was turned upside down. We were in complete quarantine. First of all, just at home, which was unfortunate because it was right around Christmas, so nobody could come and see, our new baby. And then, just trying to be a new mom and trying to learn how to even just breastfeed and hold your baby right and change diapers. But then on top of that, trying to do all that, being surrounded by, a gazillion medical people and being woken up every 4 hours was really tough. For a long time, I didn't even know how to tell friends and family what was going on with this because, I didn't even know myself what was going on with this. I didn't know what we were in for. So it was really hard to reach out and try to ask for help because I didn't even know myself what I needed. So it was difficult to be able to put into words and explain to other people what was going on with our family. So, that was part of the isolation too, was not knowing and understanding what was about to happen to us. that we couldn't seek help or support from anybody because we didn't know what was going on. And that's just something that, we kind of gradually learned once we kind of got into the hospital and understand it a little bit more about the process of bone marrow transplantation. Did we, get to settle into our hospital life and start trying to find a new way of learning to live with a new baby in a hospital surrounding.
And then you had to wait for a time period for the bone marrow transplant, right?
Yeah, we had to wait a couple months. The scary thing is when you first get educated, and we entered the hospital when Walker was 1 month old, so they'd given us a calendar, and they had told us at this age, which was right at almost 3 month mark, we would really love to find a donor. This is the optimal time and the best time for him to transplant and for the best possible results of survival. So, of course, you have this start date, 3 months down the line, and then you have your bone marrow coordinator come in like every week or every few days saying, we found a donor, and then a couple days later coming in and telling you, unfortunately, they backed out. And, obviously, legally, they can't tell you the reasons why, but it's frustrating. I think that happened to us at least maybe 6 to 7 times, and each time that you hear there's a donor, you feel hopeful, and then when you find out that they backed out, it just breaks your heart. And so that was really tough emotionally just to go through that, especially because I'm each day checking off the days, and you start getting closer and closer to that day. And for us, unfortunately, we had a couple, like I said, 6 or 7 say yes, and then for whatever reason not be able to do it. And then it was about a week before his date that they wanted to transplant. And then the nurse practitioner came in and started giving us the education on our other options. So that just was a whole nother roller coaster of emotions of thinking like, oh no, like I no longer, or my son no longer has that chance of, maybe 98% success right now. Now that we're going to option 2, we might not be looking at such a success rate. And that was a whole nother, can of worms of emotions to have to deal with. But in the end, I don't know who out there just was looking out for us, but in the end, a week before transplantation, our coordinator came to us and said the first person that had ever originally signed up, something happened with their schedule, and he was able to come back and be our bone marrow donor. So some kind of miracle worked, and we got a 10-point match bone marrow donor for my son. Unknown, unrelated donor. So
Walker has a guardian angel somewhere.
Yes, definitely, for sure.
Well, it sounds like you and your husband had a lot to manage after this diagnosis with SCID, learning about the treatments, the choices, and at the same time you're trying to manage your stress and shock. Where did you go for emotional support?
I think first and foremost, I had to just find my own strength. I don't think I could have done it without just trying to give myself my own pep talks every day. Because a lot of the time, my husband was able to work from home. His company let him work from home so he could stay germ-free through transplantation. But it was me in the hospital every day with my son Walker. And, it gets very lonely. But we had such an amazing staff at Methodist Children's that really the nurses and doctors start to become your friends, because those were the only people that I saw every day, and I relied on them to tell me what to do, how to do it, what I needed to do to give my son the best chances at having a life in general. And so you form bonds that just will always be there. But as far as local help, unfortunately, since we were the first, or not the first, but the second SCID case in San Antonio, it wasn't a widely, known thing here, and so there is no SCID group here in San Antonio. My doctors and nurses and social workers didn't even know about SCID Angels for Life. Nobody had mentioned IDF to us, so we were really just kind of alone. It was just my husband and I, and kind of our parents. But even at that, our parents were not allowed to come visit, so we kind of just stayed huddled down in the hospital for that handful of months and just relied and depended on each other. It does make, and that's the whole reason why I try to do as much for this community, whether it be the SCID community or the BMT community or IDF, anything to help get the word out there that there are other families like that out there, and they might be closer than you think. At least, with social media, it's just finding somebody on a Facebook page or just a phone call or an email, because if I would have known about IDF or SCID Angels for Life and would have been able to reach out to somebody for those 4 months that I was isolated in a hospital room all by myself with a newborn child with a SCID diagnosis, it would have made the biggest difference in the world, I think, just to be able to see some faces and hear some stories from other SCID parents on their journey. I know that everyone's journey is different, but just to know that there is hope, because even our nurses didn't know that much about SCID diagnosis. They knew about bone marrow transplants, but they couldn't really tell me any personal stories that they've had with any SCID patients, because we were only the second one here in San Antonio. So yeah, it was just a lot of a lot of just me and my husband and trying to find my own strength, really, for those first few months in the hospital.
And I think Texas had just started SCID newborn screening about 13 months prior, so.
Yeah, we got super lucky that, I think would I have had my son, a year later, I don't know that I could say that he would be with us right now, because he would have gone undetected, for sure.
So what practical advice do you have for your families who are facing similar challenges?
One of the things that I advocate the most for on behalf of my son is also to help the parents, learn to cope and deal with it, because when I go visit families in the hospital, I'm not going to tell them that it's all going to be sunshine and rainbows. I can't tell them what the outcome's going to be, because every single person and child is going to have a different, medical path and journey and recovery period. But what I can tell parents and what I try to stress to them is, when you're inpatient and you're stuck in the hospital for a handful of months anyway, to get the hospital to help you out and do the work for you, because it's hard when you get home and you're outpatient and you're back home isolated again, but with no help of a whole medical team at your disposal. It's tough to, keep your house clean and get meals, and especially if you have other children that you're taking care of too. People, I think, forget that when you're in the hospital, we have somebody that comes and cleans our room. We have the doctors and nurses to answer any question at the push of a button. We have somebody that's there to administer all the medicines and do the dressing changes. When you get back home, that's all on you to do all of that on top of maintaining your household again and having that come back into your life. So that's one of the things I try to stress to people is, educate yourself as much as possible while you're in the hospital. If you don't understand something or something doesn't make sense to you, keep asking. And if one person's not explaining it right, then wait until you find somebody that you have a relationship with at the hospital that you think can explain it to you better until you get it. And, get the social workers to help you out. If you need to get, food help or, insurance help, there's people at the hospital that can help you with, insurance coding on certain medicines or infusions that you don't understand. And while you're in the hospital, it's so much easier to be able to hand them a list and say, hey, can you go see if there's any support groups in my town And can you see if there's any grants or scholarships or whatever that can help us with finances? If there's any, food assistance in my city that can help my family while I'm unemployed. I was unemployed for 2 years, and I was not expecting that. So unfortunately, that's another thing I know. We're really hoping that some of our SCID families eventually can get some financial help down the road. But that's my biggest thing, is just to take advantage of the time that you're in the hospital and make the most of it. And also, when you do have the downtime in the hospital and you're just kind of reflecting on what's going on with you and your child and your family, I think people need to take the time, and whether it's with, a therapist or whatever, or a psychologist that's in the hospital, maybe try to figure out and find a new happy and manageable new normal for your life with a SCID kid, because it's going to be totally different. Going home and having to manage your own dressing changes and having to give your child, medicine, maybe 12 to 15 medicines twice a day, and keeping a house as clean and germ-free as possible is tough. So, everybody's got to find their new normal now. And I know there's a stigma when you say therapy, but, that's another good thing, too, is if you can take advantage, if there's any counseling, family counseling that's available to you, ask somebody for help. And, for your husband, for your other kids, because everybody has to remember that it's not just the child and the parent that's, going through it most in the hospital, but everybody in the family is affected. The husband has a different point of view of how all of this kind of goes down than, maybe the mom does. The kids will all have their own points of view and opinions, and, and I know people will feel left out, and they all need a healthy and helpful outlet to be able to do that, so that when that SCID child does come home, everybody can kind of be on the same page to have a new healthy surrounding to try to help the SCID kid, thrive and, try to live a normal life. So that's, I think, would be my biggest advice for families kind of coming out and starting a new life, with their SCID child at home.
Yes, and I recall in our earlier conversations you stressing that, mothers receive a different type of support than the husbands and the rest of the family and need a different kind of support. So I think that's a great acknowledgement. So Walker's treatment, it's been successful. Your family enters a new phase of life. Your family may still need some time to heal, both physically and emotionally. How has life been in the past year, and how is Walker doing today?
Walker's doing great now. He has been considered a well child now for a couple years. He this year started pre-K 5 days a week. Was not so excited about that. He was so used to being home with mom. He couldn't understand why he was, having to leave and go somewhere else. But it took him a couple weeks, and now he actually loves going to school and having all this socialization and having all these new friends. And we do a lot of volunteer work with the hospital and a local organization here that came and supported us at our time of need, Transplants for Children in San Antonio. So we do a lot of volunteer work, and I kind of take him around whenever I go and volunteer as much as I can, so that he kind of learns what he's gone through, because, at 3 months old, he was so young. Of course, he doesn't know or remember anything that happened, but because of the love and support that we've received and the life that we've led now, I try to include in his life a sense of purpose to give back to others as well in this medical community. But yeah, he's doing great. I will say, though, the reality is that, transplants fail. I try to explain it sometimes to other people when they ask how he's doing, that it's kind of like a battery, a car battery. Sometimes they just give. We know a lot of people that have had transplants that have failed and had to go back for, another transplant, and it breaks your heart because obviously the second one's not going to probably be as successful maybe as the first one, and then it hurts to know that, you know, it might run its course, and, you know, what happens if we don't find another donor. But, you know, I just can't think like that. You know, it really does and has taught me what everybody says, you know, you got to live every day, one day at a time. And we really do truly try to do that in our everyday life and appreciate the time that we have with him. And, you know, because every year at his anniversary in March, we're back in the hospital again for all those checkups and, you know, blood draws. And it's kind of like, it kind of throws you back into that whole feeling, washes over you of being back in the hospital when you were going through your transplantation the first time. And you get all that stress again that kind of comes back during anniversary time because you're waiting on pins and needles for all those test results to come back, which can take, you know, a month or two. And until I get the clear a month or two later, you just kind of a ball of nerves because, you know, we have had one time where something was going on with his test results, and we thought Walker was going to be able to start school maybe 2 years ago, and our doctor had called and said, you know, I have some news, and he said, one of the tests is looking like the donor cells are failing. And I was just a puddle of tears. You know, it ended up being okay, and I think it ended up being kind of a false whatever, but in that moment, just having gone through the experience of being told that the donor cells might be failing, now I kind of know what it feels like, so now I have that anxiety every anniversary that, you know, that they might be failing. But, you know, like I said, I can't live like that. I look at him every day, and I try to play as hard as I can with him and hug him as tight as I can. And, you know, we joke around almost every day, and I always tell Walker, you know, who kisses you too much every day? And his mama does. And I said, yes, I do. And that's why. It's because, you know, I'm grateful to have him. I'm grateful to the donor, the unknown donor that gave his bone marrow to my son to have life. We're grateful for, you know, the 4.5, almost 5 years that we've had him. And, you know, that's what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on the positive and the future and try not to think about it. But yeah, like I said, you know, the reality does set in around the anniversary time, and it does get stressful. But that's why I think I advocate and volunteer so much because, you know, my son's still with me, so I think it's a great way for me to go out and try to reach out to other people for support because I have living proof and living hope, you know, that they can see and meet, you know, if they're holding a newborn child with a SCID diagnosis, that they can look at my son and be like, oh, okay, that's awesome. Because I think that would make, you know, it means the world to other parents, at least that I've met, that I can show them, you know, 4-year-old pictures of my son while they're looking at their son who's hooked up to all the wires and stuff like my son was when he was just a month old, and know that, you know, like you said, there is hope at the end of the journey. And but the thing is, you know, with SCID, the journey I think is always going to be there. We're always going to be on the journey. And I don't think it ever ends for any of us SCID parents. It's just something, it's a part of our new normal. So it's just, it's our life now.
I'm so glad that your story ended the way it did. When you sent me pictures of Walker, my heart just melted. You probably would be in agreement that he is one adorable child.
Yes. Yes. A little bit biased, but yes.
Well, thank you, Nicole, so much for opening your world to us and sharing your journey. No doubt our listeners will appreciate all the helpful information and insights that you provided to us. Your story and your encouragement is certainly a source of strength and courage for others to face the challenges and regain the joy in their life.
Oh, I'm so happy to be asked to be a part of this, and anything I can ever do to help, SCID families, count me in. You guys know where to find me. Hopefully after this webinar, if any of other SCID families out there are at a loss or want to talk to me or want to know how they can maybe help other SCID families in their community, feel free to look me up, and I am happy to talk to anybody out there that needs my love and support. They have it unconditionally. I'm here.
Thanks, Nicole, and many thanks to our listeners for being with us. We hope you learned much from this discussion. At IDF, we understand the journey you're on. For many PI patients and their families, this diagnosis can be intensely emotional. For more information about coping with a SCID diagnosis, please visit primaryimmune.org or call us at 800-296-4433. IDF has a variety of resources on SCID diagnosis, from reliable information to emotional support, all to help you along the journey. Remember, you're never alone. There are always people out there who want to help. We all just have to find each other.